Welcome back to Great Lakes Junction, everyone. Well, this hopefully will be our last video for a while on this car. It's back on the 2013 Hyundai Elantra here, and we need to replace the back brakes. We need to do calipers, pads, and rotors. It was one of the things that did not pass the safety check. The opposite side, the passenger side of the vehicle, the caliper was, the inside portion of it was seized up and it was starting to leak some fluid around the piston. So it had to be replaced, and you can get away with replacing just one caliper, but I prefer to do this sort of thing in a set. So we're going to do both calipers. The rotors, they wouldn't pass them, even though they don't seem terribly bad, but they're a relatively inexpensive part. So while we're doing that, and we're doing pads, we'll do the rotors, then we know the entire back brake system is new. So for tools, we have a hammer we may or may not need. This is an impact screwdriver, and not everybody is going to have this. What it's for is there's two Phillip head screws here and here, and these two have already been broke off on this side, but they are in place on the other side of the car. So sometimes Phillip head screws can be tough to get turned, and this area is typically rusty. You'll have to try and get, loosen it a bit, get some penetrating oil in behind it, that sort of stuff. The impact screwdriver will make things hopefully much easier to take those out on the other side of the car. And we have a 14mm socket. We have a 10mm wrench for our bleeder nipple. When we're done, we'll have to bleed the air out of the brakes. We need an 11mm socket. That's going to be for the banjo bolt that's in the brake line itself. 12mm. There's a nut on the back of a bracket where there's a spring where the emergency brake cable attaches. We need a 12mm on the old brakes here to rotate that bracket a little bit. On the new ones that we're putting on, it's a different size than 12. You could use a 13, or in my case, I'm actually going to use an old standard 1/2" wrench because it fits just a little bit tighter than the 13mm does. And we also have a 14mm wrench. Just in case there's somewhere we can't get into with that socket, then we'll go to the wrench instead. So that's all we need for tools. A flat screwdriver will also be required, but that'll be it for that. We've got a drain pan. When we take the caliper off, I'm just going to throw it in the drain pan so any fluid that leaks out isn't leaking out in my driveway. That's all that's for. We clamped the brake line off here. So I put a little piece of rag or cloth around the rubber brake line and pinched it with a pair of vice grips. I didn't pinch it extremely tight, but maybe enough to stop some of the fluid from running down out of this line while it's disconnected. So these lines are in nice shape. They're not cracked or brittle or anything. If they were, you'd either be cracking them more when you did this, or you'd just replace them if they're already brittle and cracked. But these ones are in real nice shape, so hopefully we can get away with doing this without damaging the line. So we'll get into this job. So let's disconnect that brake line on there first, and we'll slide the pan under it if we have to. This is what they call a banjo bolt, and it's a special bolt. You'll see a hole in the side of it, and it's hollowed out for brake fluid to pass through it, and it uses copper washers as seals. New banjo bolt, new washers came in the new caliper already. It's all an aluminum caliper, so you be very careful when you're putting this back in that you don't over tighten it and strip the threads in that aluminum housing. There's actually a note in the box with the new calipers that tells you the same thing. So no excessive fluid at all running out of that line, so pinching it off may have helped us. Next, we'll move up to the 14mm bolt. There's one at the top here on this caliper and one right here at the bottom, and that'll separate the caliper with the piston portion in it that moves and just leave the mounting bracket bolted on. Emergency brake cable is clipped onto this. Might be a little tricky to do this with one hand, but we'll see. So there, as soon as we swung that back far enough, the emergency brake cable came off that little clip. Now we need a flat screwdriver. With our flat screwdriver, there's a slide clip here that's holding that cable into place. So we just need to work it up a little bit. Okay, now this is a spring-loaded clip, so watch it doesn't take off on you. Once you get it pried up a little bit like that, you can start to see the hole down here where it clips around. You try and get it high enough to get your screwdriver in there. And keep working it up. Small pair of vice grips. I'm just going to try and grab a hold of the top of this and just use this to finish prying it off of there. Much easier, and it doesn't take off on you because it's in your vice grips. So now that cable should slide out through the hole. There we go. So there's that part of the caliper off. So now we've got the actual mounting bracket that has to come off. Back to our 14 millimeter. There's just 2 bolts in behind. We're going to reuse these bolts. There's our mounting bracket off where your brake pads are in this portion here. Well, now that we can see better inside of here, I would say that something was seized up, probably the slider pins, and I'll show you what they are on the new ones. The slider pins, I would say, were seized up, and the inside portion of this caliper was not working. You can tell by how much rust is built up on the inside of this router that it has not been making any contact with the brake pads at all. So there's a good reason for us replacing the routers also. I don't know if you can see there just how much rust and scale is built up on the inside compared to the outside. The backing plate is starting to rot away on this one. Hopefully it's not going to create an issue because I'm not removing this center of the hub here to replace it. It's in behind it. Okay, well, that's all the old material off. Okay, so after a couple of trips back and forth to the automotive store, the rotors that they grabbed us the first time were the wrong ones. So they had charged us for the correct ones, but just pulled the wrong ones off the shelf. So we went back and exchanged those. And then when I came back to finish the job, this banjo bolt that holds the brake line on was cross-threaded into the new housing. You just couldn't get it out. It was very hard to turn. I knew there was an issue with it. So we had to go back and exchange that also. So all of our running around is done. So there's a couple of new clips that come with the pads. Everything's kind of a loose fit here at this point, so it's a little bit tricky because everything just wants to fall back out so easily. And there's one of these that has like a wear tab. So as these wear down, the end of that little steel clip will start scraping on the rotor and give you a little bit of a squealing noise, so you know they're wore down to that point. That one with the wear pad would be the inside pad in this assembly. Sits on there that way, so it's going to be over here on the inside as opposed to the outside. And these just slide into those metal clips and sit in there like that. And the other pad, same thing. sits in that clip. Now this side did have those two little screws in there. I said on the other side they were broke off, but this side they were still good. So they don't seem to serve much of a purpose of any kind. It's the first vehicle I've seen with the rotors on it that have something that actually hold the rotors. Normally, once the brakes are all on and the tires bolted on here, the tire's holding all of that on anyhow. But since we have them, we'll put them back in. Okay, so this was our main body that bolts in solid position. So we'll put this one in first. You're reusing the old bolts that came out for this part. And they don't have to be right tight at this time. So now our caliper, we need to get our emergency brake hooked back up. This is our emergency brake cable. So the cable comes through this hole. And then this part of the cable just goes on this hook here. Now this is a little bit easier if you have another person helping you for a pair of hands. So we're going to put a 1/2" wrench on this bolt right here on the end. That's going to turn this clip, the cable in, and there, it's hooked up. Now there's a lock clip or a spring clip. And that little guy, I don't know if you can see in this angle or not, goes on that cable right in there, and it'll just pop into place. And that's what holds that cable into the mount. Using the old bolts again. Now we're going to bolt that part of the caliper to the body that we've already bolted into the car. One bolt in the top, one bolt in the bottom. I'm just going to snug everything up first, not really tight, just get each one of them snugged up into place. Now everything's been snugged up now, we can start to really tighten them up now. Okay, you want to be careful how much you're tightening that stuff, because this is all aluminum, so you can strip the threads really easy. Our new banjo bolt, copper washers that they use for seals on it. Make sure you don't get this cross-threaded or anything in here. Should turn in nice and easy with your fingers. Now you'll notice a little bit of movement in there. That's fine. The way that these types of brakes work, so you got a piston in this half. The piston pushes on the inner brake pad until it's tight against the router, at which point it stops moving and it starts to draw the caliper over on the two slider pins that puts pressure on this pad against the router. And that's how you get the action of the two of them pinching that router to stop you. So once we step on the pedal and push that piston out a little bit so it tensions itself up, that shaking or whatever will be gone. The only thing we got left to do now is bleed the air out of the system. Even though we clamped off that line, from that point down you're going to have air in these lines and you need to bleed the air out of the system. So for that, they've got a protective rubber cap right there to protect the end of the bleeder nipple, and that'll be a 10 millimeter. Okay, it was a 10 millimeter on the old ones. It is 11 millimeters on the new one. Okay, we'll just make sure that we can crack it loose, snug it back up. So we'll get a rubber hose and a plastic bottle, just so we're not squirting brake fluid all over and making a mess. We'll put a rubber hose on here, and I don't have a brake bleeding kit. You can buy them, but I don't have one. So I need a second person to help me for this in the car. So I loosen this, they push the brake pedal down, forcing fluid back in the line, forcing air out. They hold the pedal on the floor, I tighten it, so when they let the pedal back up, it's not sucking air back into the system. And we keep doing that until we no longer have any air spitting out of here. We just want straight fluid coming out. Then we know we've evacuated all the air out of the brake system. Okay, so I've got a little piece of hose. I would have liked to have had a longer one that I could set the bottle in the drain pan and just run it right into the bottle. It's the only piece of hose I could find around here right now. So I'll hold that in the bottle, loosen this bleeder nut. Okay, push the brake pedal down. Are you dead? Let it up. Down. Down. Okay, hang on, hold it down for a second. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to pop the hood and go check the brake reservoir for fluid. You don't want to run that reservoir dry, or you're going to end up with air in the entire system and bleeding all four wheels. So I'll go check that now. So the pedal is up now. Yeah, I'm on it. Okay, go back down. Down. Up. Up. Down. Down. Well, we've got brake fluid running out around this bleeder nipple here. Okay, I think this time I'm going to get rid of the bottle because I want to see what's coming out of this thing. Okay, push it down. Okay, I'm going to call that one done. I didn't hear any air bubbles popping or hissing noises of air coming out. It seemed to be just fluid. So I'm going to call that one done. I'll get a rag, wipe off some brake fluid in there just so if it's going to leak later I can tell. A little protective dust cap there that is on your bleeder nipple to stop a bunch of crap from getting inside. Okay, step on the pedal again. Okay, let it up. Okay, so that's it for bleeding the brakes. So we're going to go do the other side, and then we will start the car up. We'll just move it back and forth in the driveway a little bit first just to see how it feels before we take it on the road and test them out. Well, some time has passed now since we finished doing the brakes on this car, and that was the last thing we had to do to take it in for a safety check. Everything passed, got safetied. He's now put 1,000 kilometers on this car since then, and everything is working very well. So I think that wraps up our video. Hopefully we won't have to do any more work to this vehicle for some time now. Yeah, so far it has proven to be a great little car for him. Thank you very much for watching.